two very strong parents at home. But I'd never forget one day that my mom had a penchant sometime for she would get in your ass, okay? Let me just put it that way. Now, you know how sisters can be when y'all are getting in, getting in our ass. And she was leaving to go out of town. And I'd seen this happen, more than once growing up, so it wasn't like a new thing. But the new thing that happened was that I actually saw my dad cry. And you have to understand, my dad was no punk, okay? I only saw my dad cry 2 other times. The day when I was home and they called to tell us that my mother had died, and at my grandmother's funeral. But that day, he did, and he said, I'm trying to do the best that I can. Now, it wasn't about him as a man, it was about something that she wanted him to do at the time that he hadn't done. But what she didn't understand was that it did not happen because he was not trying. It did not happen because he really did not care. I didn't even know that he cared. Blew my mind. So the point that I'm getting to, and you made me think about it when you said what you did, sisters, we know that you have, generally speaking, the right to change us. Okay? So sometimes you take us when we're not what you really want because you've already made up in your mind that you know that you can change us. But when you can't change us, then you say that we're not shit. Okay? The thing that I think that you've got to really understand, and it came in here, you got to be equally yoked. You need to put God first, relationship second, lift each other up, be there for when something goes wrong, because anybody can be there for you when everything is going right. But most of all, continue to lift each other up. We've got to lift each other, man to woman, woman to man, because the us is the most important thing. But don't ever think that men don't care, because we may not say to you that we care. We may act sometimes in a way it looks like that we're disinterested, but a man's pride sometimes makes him withdraw when things are not going well. And you may take that as being somebody being disinterested and not caring. So if there's one thing that I will say to you that you don't know about us, is that we care a lot more than you think that we do.
Well said. I'll ask this question before we allow some time for the audience to ask some questions, and if time permits, I'll get some of my other questions. So prepare your questions. So after this question, please, if you feel free to want to ask a question of these brilliant brothers, there's a microphone to my right and a microphone to my left as well. But before we do, just one more question. We as black folk have endured a lot of stuff. And one of the things that is interesting is that we often don't deal with our mental health issues the way that other communities do, but we have reasons to have more mental health issues than other communities. And so if you all could speak about what role does mental health play in a relationship between a black man and a black woman, and how often do we not consider that there are some mental health issues going on when there are some problems in the relationship? I'll start with Brother Shelton.
Wow, that's a deep one. As a community, as you said, we dealt with mental health issues much differently. We always had that uncle up in the back room, don't go up there, he ain't right. We didn't send him to the doctor. We just put him in the back room and just told everybody to stay away. The real issue that we have to come to grips with is, if there is an issue, we've got to deal with it. And as a man, sometimes when we're having mental issues, we don't get help. It's like take your husband or take your man to the doctor day. We don't go to the doctor unless it's critical. And sometimes that mental issue is critical when the divorce papers are being drawn up, or the relationship is over and it's too far to save. but it requires a little bit on both sides. We have to be in tune to each other, not to our expectations of each other, but what's going on in each other's mind, body, and soul. Because if we're really in tune as a couple, we can detect a little issue or an issue that is arising from a mental standpoint. And we may not be able to correct it, but we can get help. But sometimes when we're in relationships, we have our own agenda. And our agenda does not allow us to tune in to what's going on with that other person enough to impact or affect fixing that mental issue. So, number one, we have to get help. Number two, we have to be perceptive. And number three, we have to be willing to put our own agenda aside to help that person that we talk about, the fact that we love.
Okay. All right then. At this moment in time, are there any questions in the audience? Please feel free to come up. Go ahead, brother.
Hello. My name is Joseph Bedford. I appreciate this opportunity and this gathering that we have here. It's more of a statement and a question at the end. Gentleman second on the end here made a comment, a term. Oh, you used the term earlier, and I kind of want you to define that term. The statement part is every young man that's standing on that corner is not a woman beater. You made a comment about thugs. In my younger days, I was one of the guys that was on that corner, and I was lucky enough to come up off that corner. But the term thug that you use, I would like for you to define that term that you use. Yes.
Now, when I was using the term thug, I'm looking at it as really, those are the main instances of it that I see as far as when students, young girls or whatever, come to me. I think honestly what it is they're mistaking somebody that'll snatch him up as being a man as opposed to somebody who just stands for what he believes in. A man that stands for what he believes in can come from anywhere. But for some reason, they attribute this look, this swagger, this snarl and everything. Okay, that's what a man is. Yeah, he don't give a damn. You know, that's why he looked like that. You know, that type of thing. So that is the terminology I give it, because yeah, it's pejorative, but when I see somebody come to my class wearing shades for 2 weeks straight, and they were chatty and talkative and all this other kind of stuff, and I ain't got no love for where that came from. That's the best way I can put it.
Hello, I'm Chris Cook. I'm an attorney here in South Florida. I heard you guys talk about a lot of things like communication, honesty, and those things being important in relationships. One of the things I didn't really hear you guys touch on was the importance of roles, of identifying roles of individuals in relationship and the communication necessary to start the individuals involved in identifying and defining those roles.
Well, everyone has a role, and we get stuck on, well, a man should do this, and that's his role, or a woman should do this. It's who's ever strong in a particular situation, as far as I'm concerned, that should take on that role. If the tree needs to get cut down, he needs to take his ass out there and cut down the tree, if he's home.
Now, I just want to say, along with that or whatever, we are in the midst of transition. I know you can say that all the time, but as far as roles are concerned, we are in the midst of transition. As far as my dad was, you know, Mr. Mancho, played Teddy Pendergrass, and he was a man, and he did this, or whatever the case is. But as I'm coming up, you hear more and more about the woman making more than the man, right? And I've heard sisters say, well, that's not a big deal. I mean, that's done, it shouldn't matter, it shouldn't matter. But you let an argument go the wrong way, and his little making $5,000 less ass, he gonna get put on notice quick. I had a brother, his wife got a $3,000 raise over him, and she started making decisions that he didn't. Well, by the way, we're going to a vacation, we're doing this cruise, we are. I've already said it. You can't talk to me, just $3,000 change the situation. So a lot of people, a lot of sisters or whatever, are entertaining the idea, the theory that they're hearing of certain things, but it hasn't really inculcated into, their day-to-day movements. So roles are shifting, which means all the more that communication is important, because you got to be honest with yourself. Yeah, I said that, but in practice, be for real. Be for real.
I'm glad you brought that up, roles. To me, that goes hand in hand with, like my brother said, compatibility. Because every single relationship is different. Every single relationship is going to have different roles with different situations. And that also goes into honesty. You can get into, difficulties like that and blow up arguments because you don't know who you're laying next to, once again. So you need to have those candid conversations to go through that, from the joining phase of team building to the storming phase. Every relationship is going to have that storming phase where you're figuring out who works best in what situation. And then you have the norming phase in a team, and then you become the performing phase. And that's all through relationships or team building, classrooms, you name it. But if you don't have those, again, those candid, honest conversations to know if you're compatible or not, then you're never going to find those good roles to maximize a relationship.
I completely agree. I believe in roles. I live in the generation where the women that I run into, my sisters, family, friends, girlfriends, we in the 50-50 generation. I don't believe in the 50-50. I believe that roles are interchangeable at all times, because on a team, you need an assignment. And if we don't have any assignments and we don't have any roles, then this defense, we're not going to win. We're not going to score. So you have to know your role in different situations. And along with compatibility, learning to be both men and women, being submissive in different situations, and understanding, hey, she got this. This is your thing, I can personally say I'm not the best. I can't spell as well as I'm supposed to. So I'm like, baby, I need you to go ahead and review this. You get what I mean? So, but I know that if that's her thing, then I let her take care of that thing. And I feel like we all have to understand that if a man, for the women, if a man has his thing, let him support him as much as you can to make sure that the role that he has in your relationship, the assignment is getting done as best as it possibly can. So.
Peace, brothers. How y'all doing? My name is Asa Shaw. I have a question about how we as men can begin to change some of the behaviors that we have grown up with being men. Currently, we're in if you all are aware of the Me Too campaign, which is this campaign where a whole bunch of women across across the nation and across the world really are beginning to come out about sexual harassment and sexual harms that they've had from men and supervisors, family members, and different things like that. And I want to ask you all, what can we do as men to support women in that? Because it takes a lot of courage to come out, because they're seen as they're othered a lot of times when they come out about sexual harms and things of that nature. And also, as men, how can we change some of the behaviors that we have that lead to other men sexually harassing women, right? So a lot of people think of someone that commits rape or someone that sexually assaults a woman as just this really outlier or evil person, right? But a lot of times these people that do these harms are regular, everyday men, right? So they're not like the Joker or like the person that you think of as a villain. It's in each and every one of us, and we do things every day that lead up to something like that. So it could be us being in the club with our homies or our brothers, and we see our friend grope a woman in the club, and then we all laugh about it and not check him on it, right? Or locker room talk, the way that we talk as men, the way we refer to women. These things are small things, but these are things that make it okay make men think it's okay to sexually harass women. So how do we change our behavior in that sense? And this is actually getting to I think the essence of what it is to be a man society, right? So how do we change those behaviors so that we can stop all the men that continually to sexually harass, assault, and rape women, and basically oppress them in ways that they should not be oppressed?
Really quickly before the men chime into that, I just wanted to be known, the Me Too campaign was popularized, if you will, by an actress, but it's important for you to know that it was created by a black woman about a decade ago, right? And one of the things that, because actually that was one of my questions, so but we always typically right here. So like one of the things it's important to know is black women are sexually assaulted more than any other group. And if you've been noticing though on the news, when we talk about sexual assault, black women are not being referenced a lot of times. And in particular, a lot of it starts with as children, right? There is a lot of molestation that goes on that we don't talk about. Not just black men, but also black women who have been confronted by their daughters and saying, yeah, your boyfriend touched me, and then the daughter is told, no, you're lying. And that's a part of the issue. Some of the alarming statistics I've seen is somewhere between the 40 to 60 percentile as far as the amount of black females that have been sexually assaulted and sexually harassed. And so I just wanted to add that context before we answer it, that black women face this more than any other group. In particular, even when we talk about how black women are sexually assaulted or even their bodies are missing, how if a black female is missing, that is covered in the news completely differently than if a white female is missing, right? And so that's something that we definitely need to address. So I just want to provide some of that context. So with that being said, what do we do to go about solving that? How do we correct our behavior and our friends' behaviors so we can limit sexual assault that happens in the black female community?
Well, first of all, I mean, we have to, if we're going to change anybody, we have to change ourselves. And changing the people around us, how we act when we go to the club, how we talk when we're around each other, what kind of conversations are we having? There are conversations that permeate through our relationships as African American men, sometimes that even though there's no women there are not appropriate. So we have to start to find other things to talk about, other activities, and other ways to act. You know, it's becoming more and more of an issue, but if you remember, Anita Hill brought this up many years ago, and it was brushed under the rug with her relationship with Clarence Thomas. Now all of a sudden, because there are women of other colors that are now having this issue, it's becoming a hot topic. But it's always been a hot topic. But it goes back to, number one, how do we respect ourselves as men? And if we respect ourselves, that needs to go into how we respect women. Do we have the respect for our women that we need to have? And if we have that, and it still happens, maybe it's a mental issue. So we have to look at all those areas and all those angles and make a change.
It's definitely a conditioning issue that's, part of the upbringing of young men, from being boys and what we've seen in the pop culture, so on and so forth. But as I sat here, I was thinking about there's a sister in Atlanta. Matter of fact, ICABA honored her last week, and she runs an organization called Silence the Shame. And Silence the Shame is a foundation that she formed with Nick Cannon. It's about silencing the shame of suicide. Her father had committed suicide, and she's a major entertainment executive, and she was having thoughts about it, and so she got help. But many times people don't want to talk about it, so we were talking about the whole mental health thing, so their point is kind of bringing it out to the open. I wanted to give a little quick context because I want to use the name of her organization to maybe suggest how we can deal with this issue. And I want to say we can silence the shame. And what I mean is this: when there are conversations that happen, everybody here, probably at some point in your life, you've said something inappropriate. And the silence, you thought it was cute and funny. The people that were sitting around did not find it cute and funny, and they were silent. And that silence killed you. Something as simple as that may be able to help us in part. It's not the total answer. That when we as brothers hear other brothers talk about, man, I'm gonna go over and smack that. Don't laugh at him. Don't encourage him. When you see something happening, don't, applaud and say, yo, that's cool. I think one of the things that people can do is to show by their lack of support that those things are not cool. It really kind of starts with us. And the last thing I say is that we have to do the thing that my mother taught me. She taught me, she said, son, you treat a woman the same way that you want your mother and your sister to be treated. And that we have that standard and we don't allow other folks to be disrespectful in our presence, I think we can make a major dent in getting rid of some of this sexual harassment.
So really quickly, just because of time, we're gonna have to move on. So quickly on this one, and then what we'll do from here on out, because there's so many people on the line, just one respondent, one panelist, and then move on to the next. So just one question. So Asa, thank you so much for your question.
My response to that is we also got to put people in check. We have a mutual friend that was having a conversation and actually the conversation was in the presence of a woman, and the way he communicated was very disrespectful. But I put him in check. I didn't just let that go. So we got to put people in check.
Hey everybody, my name is Caprice, and I'm also from Miami, Florida, and right now I'm a grad student at Nova, Southeastern University. So my question was going towards what you guys were discussing in the beginning about the uniqueness of the black man, and what seemed to be consistent in all you guys' responses was the ability to assimilate and camouflage and be a figurative chameleon, so to speak. But I was thinking in my mind that the constant change through each environment that you guys go through would seem to be a conflict, or maybe be a conflict through with the identity of your true self, assuming that you're continuing to deviate away from your true self. If you have to constantly change, if you're on the job, if you're in college, if you're at home. And so I guess in my mind, in a perfect world, you shouldn't have to assimilate or change your true identity or your true self. So I guess my question is there a reward for this constant change and assimilation? And if there is a reward, is it worth continuing to deviate away from what you deem to be your true identity or your true self?
The reward is survival, first and foremost. But also let me say, when I said camouflage, maybe that's not the best word, but the idea is so many young males, speaking about on campus or whatever, they've been hit with only one identity. I'm from the street, I'm hood, I'm this and that, so on and so forth. So they're so rigid that this is who I am, this is all I'm supposed to be. That when they come, and then I'm telling them, you know, in about a year or so, you might need a suit or two. Suit? What you talking about? Okay, and it's not just a thing of being immature, it's you're taking my blackness from me. What are you talking about? And I'm trying to tell them, okay, as you grow, you need different looks. There's different parts of you that you need to develop. You need the professional side, okay? You still need that side when you go over to your girlfriend's family reunion, you got your flip-flops and your khakis and you playing and with the cards and talking smack. Yeah, you need that. You also need that, you know, when you got to go to church and do your thing. You need different personas. It is you. All of it is you. But the thing is, you've been stuck in one so long that you think that that's all you are, if that makes any kind of sense. So, you know, I was walking to the bookstore or whatever, and this guy was arguing with this girl, you know, I give you money for books, I do all kinds of stuff for you, what you want? And she said, everything. And I was walking, he looked at me like, God, what do I do? Oh, bro, that's you. That's you right there. Then you did that. But clearly I understood that she was saying, okay, you can't just be this backpack dude right now. That's good, but what are the other aspects of you? We're not going to be this forever. Eventually, you're going to have to get you a job, or whatever the case is. Eventually, you're going to have to, you know, present yourself in different arenas, and you need to be comfortable in being these. You got to be multidimensional.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Greg Salters. I'm a major here at one of the law enforcement agencies. I want to tell you all I really enjoy the panel and the way that you all are presenting the multiple dimensions of a black man. And one thing I want to do is just touch on a little bit of things that we deal with, because one of the things I always talk about is success is options. And as you're talking about Dr. Hobbs and everybody on the stadium, when you all are talking about it, every time we talk about the black male, we're doing things that are going to create our options. And in law enforcement, it's kind of interesting because we don't have that many blacks that are in law enforcement, particularly in executive roles. But in that key, I'm too blue to be black and too black to be blue. So then we get caught up in that dichotomy. And when you talk about it from a male role in a household, if your significant other is looking at us to be the male and be the lead, and we're catching all this hell on the job, and we might get downsized, and the sister might be making more. Sisters, if you're making more, that's in our household. When we go out to eat, the waiter don't need to know that by you passing him the money. Can you give it to me before we get there? I mean, at least don't take it away from me when we're outside. At least act like I'm doing this. And a lot of times, you know, some people tell a lot of ladies that they've been paying for it. And then also, when we talk about roles in relationships, we also have to understand that the role that works for my neighbor or what might work on the Atlanta housewives when none of them married, what we have to do is their partnership might not be the same as in our household. And I like what you're saying, brother. I got the same thing with the wife. If something needs to happen, get somebody to do it. That doesn't mean she got to do it. But if you all are working together, we got a bank account that can pay somebody to get that thing done. Get the tree chopped down. And when you're doing it, that's what makes for a sound relationship. And a lot of times, whenever we're doing in our relationships, don't put it on social media. Because if you put on social media today and y'all over it tonight, it's still out there tomorrow. And what you put out there, let the next brother know what he got to do to get you. Thank you.
All right.
Good afternoon. I'm Rashawn Banks, and I run a law firm here in Broward for the past 12 years. So I consider myself one of those confident, strong women you all describe. And so my question is, those same qualities you want in a woman, we want in a man. So when we're faced with the men you described who have been emasculated and they have to be chameleons, how, it's kind of like what the sister said before about being true to yourself and being strong and confident as well. How do these two people meet or come together? The strong, confident woman who you're looking for, and that woman who's looking for you, but you're being a chameleon, and you're you feel so, you know what I'm trying to say?
So just because it's all you were looking at me, I feel like I just need to answer. And it's a reasonable question, but there's a few things I think we need to consider. One aspect is that too often we are waiting for romantic relationships and being involved in them rather than as a community, holistic relationships and preparing ourselves for romance in the future. And so let me kind of explain what I mean by that. Black woman, there's a shirt that I have that says the black woman is God. And so I have a deep, profound belief in the divine energy in black women. I would say though that one of the things I'm concerned about is that black women are getting to a place of fatigue, and it's reasonable. But black women have been at the very heart of our community for so long. And one of my fears is, well, if black women decide we've had it, well, what is the future of ourselves and our communities, right? And one of the things that I think occurs too often is that at times, and I teach as well at a college, black women or some of my young black female students are not just having regular conversations with some black men. And so what happens is if we're just simply saying, well, wait, I'm looking for this romantic partner, well, the question becomes, what have we, both black men and black women, done to have holistic conversations and also not only dialogue, but actions to make us better for a romantic future? That's one aspect. Secondly, I would also suggest that it is not that the market is not available, we're just going to the wrong store. And so what a lot of times what happens is that we are meeting people in the wrong places. I'm not saying it's impossible, but if you're going to the club, not saying you are, and you're expecting to meet like the next responsible person in your life, it may or may not happen, right? And it's funny because I am married, but I also have a lot of black female friends who are phenomenal. And one of the things I will say is I've met different black women who I'm not with in a romantic way, but in film festivals, bookstores, certain conversations. In other words, we as black people need to get outside of our box and go to different places and meet museums and meet these black men, because they do exist, in places that they're going to frequent. And so one of the challenges that I think exists is, well, where are we meeting these individuals, right? Because they do exist. And then lastly, too, there are some brothers who are the men that you want characteristically, but because he doesn't look of a particular physical nature, or because we put an expectation of masculinity, and we essentially, because black women too are at times guilty of this, suggesting that, well, he's not man enough. Well, what do we determine is a man, right? First of all. Second of all, what is it based on in regards to this conversation? Some years ago, there was a book that was written by Ellis Coles called The Envy of the World. And he takes the book because, he takes a quote rather from a Toni Morrison book, where she essentially says, you know, black men, white women want you, your children want you to come home, black women love you, I guess you're the, you know, white men want to be you, I guess you're the envy of the world. And so Coles in the book, he talks about, there's a particular part where he says, he's interviewing some black men who say, I love black women and would want to be with one, but they don't think I'm black enough for them. And that's another aspect too, right? Like some of the brothers that are good catches are not being caught. And they end up going somewhere else. I'm not saying I support that, but those are some things that definitely need to be considered.
Very fast. Yeah, this lady here, and then this gentleman, and then we got her out.
Good evening. First and foremost, thank you, gentlemen. This is a very dynamic forum. A long-awaited series in this South Florida community. You've been here 20 years as an immigrant, and we cannot end here. I would like to see this series continue, not every year, but at least once a month, because I've heard from my elders, and I've matured enough to recognize that for us to to actually prompt change, we have to be the change agents. So one of my comments, it's probably a rhetorical question, is in becoming more educated, and I speak of education in terms of awareness of what's going on within ourselves, our community, and so by the nation, do you think that inherently we still have that dialogue going on in our heads, and it's just in our heads? We have really evolved, and I just want to point out that as an initial comment in the beginning, and I'm going to use that to ask the question, you like to come home, relax, unwind, and your home to be your sanctuary. Have you thought that as we have become breadwinners as well, we're also wanting the same things? So it's almost like I'm asking you, have you evolved to that place where we are ready to recognize what your needs are? Because we have been out there toiling, we experience the same thing, and sometimes we do want to come home to that sanctuary, kick our feet up, read the newspapers, and do absolutely nothing. So I ask the question, is the dialogue just in our head, and have we actually evolved where we're actioning what needs to be done?
Well, you know, what you touched on is called teamwork and interchangeable roles. Nobody in this day and age can say that they have an expectation of just this when they return home. Now, I will say this to you also, though. Men and women, as everybody knows, are built differently. We thrive in an environment of peace and quiet. Women love to ask questions and talk. Our sense of peace when we come home from work is to kick off our shoes and veg. Say nothing to no one for at least 35, 40 minutes. Conversely, now I've been married for a long time. When I come home, or when she comes home, she wants to talk. There are days where that talking sends me over the edge, but I have to accept it. Conversely, the days when you come home and he doesn't want to talk, you have to accept it and not get upset. So we have to work together through these issues, and I'll call them areas of opportunity, to improve our relationship in our homes, which allows us to improve our relationships outside of the home.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Joel Gresham, and I'd like to say one thing about this dialogue. Don't you think it's about time that we change it? I mean, we're talking about the same thing over and over and over again. I'm not being negative, but like the sister, she was saying, is it in our minds? But it's our paradigms, it's in our subconscious mind. Because if you keep talking about this, it's going to continue to happen over and over again. So let's get to some solutions. Let's make some changes. Stop talking about each other. We have an open book. I don't know any other races throughout this whole country that I travel that I've seen on a panel that's talking about their race. I think it's a shame. I think we need to change this, and I think we need to start probably with our next panel.
And then quickly I'll say something.
To start, I appreciate the comment because I felt the same about different state of the unions, state of the black community, different things as such. I'm definitely solution oriented. I'm 28 years old, and although the conversation may be the same, every time you have this conversation, there's one more person that needs to hear it. And I do believe we have a great opportunity, and we will take advantage of it for this to become, if it hasn't already been solution oriented today for some, because I believe I learned a lot about these gentlemen, some more about myself, and I'm pretty sure everybody out here in the audience probably has as well. But to your point, the gentleman, I'm not sure exactly where he went. I believe these conversations are definitely a necessity in our community more often than we already believe, because this is not filled today. It's not packed out. So you gotta invite a friend, you gotta invite a friend. I gotta send an e-blast again, and we gotta pack it out so we can continue to have this conversation, and to your point, start to bring solutions to the table. So.